Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you love emotional and life-changing stories with shocking twists, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Today's story will leave you speechless. A cold-hearted billionaire publicly humiliates his poor maid in front of his elite guests after she accidentally breaks an expensive bottle of wine. But just when he thinks he's taught her a lesson, a dark family secret comes to light, and he discovers the maid he slapped is actually his only daughter. Stick around till the end. You won't believe how this truth changes everything. Now let's dive in. I can't do this anymore, Elena. The words hit like a physical blow, stopping Elena Rodriguez mid-sentence as she reached for the salt. Her husband of 12 years sat across their small kitchen table, his eyes fixed on his untouched dinner, unable to meet her gaze. "Can't do what?" she whispered, though something deep in her chest already knew. Marcus finally looked up, and the coldness in his eyes made her stomach drop. Us. Pretending we're something we're not. Elena's hand trembled as she set down her fork. Around them, their modest apartment felt suddenly suffocating. The faded wallpaper, the second-hand furniture, the wedding photo on the refrigerator showing two young people who believed love could conquer anything. "Marcus, what are you talking about? We just got back from dinner with your colleagues. Everything was fine." Everything was not fine. He slammed his palm against the table, making her jump. "Do you have any idea how I felt tonight? Watching you stumble through conversations with people who matter? Seeing how they looked at you, at us." The cruelty in his voice was like nothing she'd ever heard from him before. Elena pressed her hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. "They were perfectly nice to me. Sarah even complimented my dress." Sarah was being polite. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "God, Elena, can't you see it? I'm up for partner at the firm." "Partner? Do you understand what that means? And you show up in some discount store dress, barely able to hold a conversation about anything beyond your little bookkeeping job." Each word landed like a slap. Elena had worked so hard tonight, had practiced conversations in the mirror, had saved for months to buy that dress. She'd thought she'd done well, thought Marcus had been proud when she'd made Mr. Harrison laugh with her story about the office cat. "I thought you loved me," she said quietly. Marcus turned from the window, and for a moment, just a moment, something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe. Or guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "I do love you. I always will. But love isn't enough anymore." He straightened his shoulders, and Elena recognized the posture. It was the same one he used when delivering bad news to clients. Professional. Detached. "I've been seeing someone else." The world tilted. Elena gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. "Her name is Victoria. She's everything I need for where I'm going in life. She's sophisticated, educated, beautiful. She fits into my world in ways that—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. "In ways that I don't," Elena finished, her voice barely audible. He didn't deny it. Elena stared at the man she'd married, the man she'd supported through law school by working double shifts at the diner, the man she'd believed in when everyone else said he'd never amount to anything. His dark hair was perfectly styled now, his clothes expensive, his body lean from the gym membership she'd encouraged him to get. Success suited him. She just hadn't realized it would make him ashamed of her. "I want a divorce," he said simply. "I've already moved most of my things to Victoria's place. I'll come back tomorrow for the rest." Elena felt something crack inside her chest, but she forced herself to sit up straighter. "Just like that? 12 years, and you're walking away just like that? Elena, please don't make this harder than it has to be. We both know this isn't working anymore. You'll be happier with someone more compatible. Someone from your own background." The condescension in his voice ignited something she didn't know she possessed. "My background," she repeated slowly. "You know what I mean. We want different things now. I need someone who can help me build the life I've worked for. Someone who can stand beside me at firm events and charity galas, and actually belong there." Elena stood up, her legs unsteady, but her voice growing stronger. "Someone who won't embarrass you, you mean?" Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It's not about embarrassment. It's about compatibility. About having a partner who shares my ambitions, my social circle, my—" "Your money," Elena cut him off. "You mean someone who can match your new tax bracket. That's not fair. Isn't it?" Elena walked over to their wedding photo, touching the glass with trembling fingers. In the picture, Marcus was gazing at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. She was wearing her mother's simple wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and her hair was done by her sister in their tiny bathroom. They'd been so young, so certain that their love could survive anything. "I supported you through law school," she said quietly. "I worked 2 jobs so you could focus on your studies. I ate ramen for dinner so you could have proper meals. I believed in you when no one else did. And I'm grateful for that. I really am. But now that you don't need me anymore, now that you've become someone important, you're trading me in for a newer model." Marcus flinched. "It's not like that." Elena turned to face him, and something in her expression made him take a step back. "Yes, it is. It's exactly like that. You're ashamed of where you came from, Marcus. You're ashamed of me because I remind you that you weren't always this polished, successful man. I remind you that you used to struggle, that you used to need help, that you used to be real." "Elena, get out." Her voice was steady now, cold in a way that surprised them both. "Go to your Victoria with her perfect pedigree and her trust fund and her ability to fit into your precious world. Go build your new life with someone who won't remind you of who you really are." Marcus opened his mouth to say something, then closed it. He walked toward the bedroom, then stopped at the doorway. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I really did love you. I probably always will. But not enough," Elena replied. "Not enough to fight for us. Not enough to remember that love isn't supposed to be conditional on how well someone performs at dinner parties." He left without another word. Elena stood in the sudden silence of her kitchen, staring at the 2 plates of food growing cold on the table. Somewhere in the building, a dog was barking. A couple was arguing in the apartment upstairs. Life was continuing around her while hers had just shattered completely. She walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Brown hair that she'd tried to style nicely for tonight, but had never quite looked right. Dark eyes that were pretty enough but nothing special. A face that was pleasant but forgettable. A body that was soft where magazines said it should be firm, curves where fashion said there should be angles. For 12 years, Marcus had told her she was beautiful. For 12 years, she'd believed him. Now she saw what he saw, a woman who didn't belong in his new world. A woman who would always be just a little too plain, a little too simple, a little too much like the life he'd left behind. Elena pressed her palms against the bathroom counter and made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to beg him to come back. She wasn't going to plead or cry or promise to change just to win his love again. She was going to change anyway. Not for him. For herself. Because maybe, just maybe, she'd been settling for too little her entire life. Maybe she'd been so busy supporting Marcus's dreams that she'd forgotten she was allowed to have her own. Elena Rodriguez had spent 12 years being someone's wife, someone's support system, someone's background character. Starting tomorrow, she was going to discover who Elena Rodriguez could be when she was just herself. 3 weeks later, Elena sat in the employee break room of Henderson and Associates Accounting, staring at the divorce papers Marcus's lawyer had served her that morning. The settlement was generous, suspiciously so. The apartment, a lump sum payment, and spousal support that would last 2 years. Enough to make her disappear quietly from his new life. "Honey, you look like you've seen a ghost." Elena looked up to find Diane Chen settling into the chair across from her, concern creasing her weathered face. At 62, Diane had been the office manager at Henderson and Associates for nearly 3 decades, and in the 2 years Elena had worked there, she'd become something of a surrogate mother. "Divorce papers," Elena said simply, sliding them across the table. Diane's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. "Good Lord, Elena. This is a lot of money. What did you do, catch him with the governor's daughter?" Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. "Close. A corporate lawyer named Victoria something hyphenated. Apparently, I wasn't sophisticated enough for his new position at the firm." "Sophisticated?" Diane's voice rose an octave. "You're the smartest person in this office. You reorganized our entire filing system in 3 months and saved Mr. Henderson thousands in audit fees." Marcus is an idiot. Elena had never told Diane much about her marriage, but now, sitting in the harsh fluorescent light of the break room, surrounded by motivational posters and the smell of burnt coffee, the whole story came tumbling out. How she'd worked 2 jobs to put Marcus through law school. How she'd given up her own dreams of getting a business degree to support his career. How she'd spent 12 years making herself smaller so he could shine brighter. "I was 17 when I met him," Elena said, her voice growing quieter. "He was this ambitious college boy from across town, and I was just me, working at my family's restaurant, dreaming of maybe taking some business classes at the community college someday. Diane leaned forward, listening intently. My parents died in a car accident when I was 19. Marcus was there for me through all of it, the funeral, settling their affairs, dealing with the debt they'd left behind. He was my rock. When he proposed, I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. And you were, Diane said firmly. Any man would be lucky to have you. Elena shook her head. I lost myself, Diane. Somewhere between supporting his dreams and trying to be the perfect wife, I forgot I was allowed to have dreams of my own. Last night, I was looking through some old boxes, and I found this. She pulled out a worn brochure from her purse, a community college catalog from 15 years ago. The business program section was highlighted in yellow, with notes scribbled in the margins in Elena's careful handwriting. I was going to study accounting, maybe even get a bachelor's degree eventually. But then Marcus needed help with law school expenses, and then he graduated and needed me to support him while he looked for work. And then, she trailed off. There was always something more important than my education. Diane studied the brochure, then looked back at Elena with sharp eyes. How old are you, honey? 34. 34. Diane sat back in her chair. You know what I was doing at 34? Getting divorced from my first husband. A man who thought my job was to make him look good at faculty parties. You know what I did next? Elena shook her head. I went back to school. Got my business degree at 36, MBA at 40. Started my own consulting firm, and ran it for 20 years before I decided to semi-retire here. Diane leaned forward again. 34 isn't the end of your story, Elena. It's not even the middle. It's just the beginning of the good part. Before Elena could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus. Asterisk, can we meet for coffee? There are some things we need to discuss about the settlement. Asterisk. Elena stared at the message, her heart racing despite herself. Part of her, the part that had loved him for 17 years, wondered if he was having second thoughts. If maybe he'd realized what he was throwing away. Go, Diane said, reading her expression. But remember, you're worth more than being someone's backup plan. An hour later, Elena sat across from Marcus at the coffee shop where they'd had their first date. He looked different, more expensive. His suit probably cost more than she made in a month, and his watch was definitely new. Success suited him, just like she'd always known it would. You look good, he said, and there was something almost surprised in his voice. Elena had made an effort that morning, choosing a dress that actually fit her properly instead of the loose, shapeless clothes she'd been hiding in for years. She'd even stopped by the salon on her way over for a quick trim that had somehow made all the difference. Thank you, she said simply. What did you want to discuss? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The settlement. I know it seems like a lot, but I want to make sure you're taken care of. That you can start over. There it was, the guilt money. The price of his freedom from their shared past. It's generous, Elena agreed. More than generous. Good. Good. He fidgeted with his coffee cup. Victoria thinks maybe we should add a clause about discretion. Nothing personal, just to protect both our privacy during the transition. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Discretion about what? Just, if anyone asks about our marriage, maybe keep things simple? Say we grew apart, wanted different things. That sort of thing. You want me to lie about why you left. Not lie. Just not get into details that might be taken out of context. Elena stared at him. Details like how you abandoned your wife for a younger woman? Details like how you're ashamed of where you came from. Elena, please. I'm going to be a partner soon. Victoria comes from a very prominent family. Her father is a federal judge. We just need to be careful about appearances. Appearances. Elena set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. Of course. Can't have your new in-laws knowing you were married to someone beneath your station. It's not like that. Yes, it is. Elena's voice was calm, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. It's exactly like that. You want to pay me to disappear so you can pretend I never existed. So you can pretend you didn't spend 12 years with someone you're now ashamed to acknowledge. Marcus looked around nervously, aware that other patrons were starting to glance their way. Keep your voice down. Why? Worried someone might recognize me? Worried they might wonder how Marcus Rivera, rising star at Caldwell, Brooks and Associates, ended up having coffee with someone so clearly beneath him. Elena, stop. But Elena was just getting started. Months of swallowed words, years of making herself smaller, decades of accepting less than she deserved. All of it was rising to the surface. "I supported you when you had nothing," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I believed in you when no one else did. I sacrificed my own dreams to help you build yours. And now you want to pay me to pretend it never happened. I'm trying to do right by you." "No, you're trying to erase me." Elena stood up, and Marcus looked genuinely startled by the fire in her eyes. "You want to rewrite history so your new life is neat and clean, with no messy reminders of the woman who helped you get there." She leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting. "I won't sign your discretion clause, Marcus. I won't lie for you, and I won't pretend our marriage was something it wasn't. You want to move on? Fine. But you don't get to take my truth with you." Elena walked toward the door, then turned back. Marcus was staring after her, his face pale. "Oh, and Marcus? When people ask me about our divorce, and they will ask, I'm going to tell them exactly what happened. I'm going to tell them about the man who was so ashamed of his wife that he traded her in for a better model. I'm going to tell them about the woman who loved him enough to sacrifice everything, and how he threw it all away for the illusion of prestige." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But mostly, I'm going to tell them about the woman who refused to disappear. The woman who decided she was worth more than being someone's shameful secret. The woman who's just getting started." Elena walked out of the coffee shop with her head held high, leaving Marcus staring after her in shock. She'd meant every word. But as she walked home through the city streets she'd lived in for 17 years, Elena realized something that made her stomach drop. She'd just declared war on a man who was about to become one of the most powerful lawyers in the city. A man who was dating the daughter of a federal judge. A man who now had every reason to want to destroy her. She'd burned a bridge she might not be able to rebuild. But for the first time in years, Elena Rodriguez felt completely, authentically alive. That evening, she called the number on the community college brochure she'd been carrying around for 15 years. "Admissions office," a cheerful voice answered. "Hi," Elena said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I'd like to know about your evening business program. When does the next semester start?" "Fall semester begins in 6 weeks. Are you interested in scheduling an appointment to discuss your goals?" Elena looked around her empty apartment, at the spaces where Marcus's things used to be, at the wedding photos she'd finally taken down, at the life she was about to leave behind. "Yes," she said. "I'd like to schedule an appointment. I have some very specific goals I'd like to discuss." As she hung up the phone, Elena caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her was still the same person who'd been abandoned 3 weeks ago. But something in her eyes had changed. Something that looked dangerously like determination. 6 weeks later, Elena sat in the back row of Introduction to Business Law, her notebook open and her pen poised, feeling like an imposter among students half her age. At 34, she was easily the oldest person in the room, and her carefully chosen professional outfit felt somehow wrong next to the casual jeans and hoodies surrounding her. "The concept of good faith and fair dealing," Professor Daniel Reeves said, pacing in front of the whiteboard, "requires that parties to a contract act honestly and fairly toward each other. It prevents one party from taking advantage of another's vulnerabilities or using superior bargaining power to extract unconscionable terms." Elena found herself writing furiously, not just taking notes but thinking about every contract she'd ever signed, including her marriage license, which had apparently come with terms she'd never understood. "Miss Rodriguez?" Elena's head snapped up. Professor Reeves was looking directly at her, his expression expectant. Around her, 20-something students turned to stare. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question," she said, heat rising in her cheeks. "I asked if you could think of a real-world example where someone might use superior bargaining power to extract unfair terms from someone in a vulnerable position." Elena's mind went immediately to the coffee shop 3 weeks ago, to Marcus's attempts to buy her silence, to the generous settlement that came with strings attached. She glanced around the room at the young faces watching her, then back at Professor Reeves. "Divorce settlements," she said quietly. "When one spouse has significantly more money and legal resources than the other, they might offer a large settlement in exchange for the other spouse agreeing to terms that protect the wealthier party's reputation or future earning potential. The vulnerable spouse might feel they have to accept because they can't afford a prolonged legal battle." The room was silent. Professor Reeves studied her for a moment, and Elena was certain she'd said too much, revealed too much. "Excellent example," he said finally. That's exactly the kind of situation where courts might find an unconscionable contract, especially if there's evidence of emotional manipulation or exploitation of the weaker party's financial desperation. After class, Elena was packing up her things when Professor Reeves approached her desk. "Miss Rodriguez, could I speak with you for a moment?" Elena's stomach dropped. She'd been in school for exactly 6 weeks and was already in trouble. "That was a very insightful answer today," he said, settling into the desk beside hers. Daniel Reeves was probably in his early 40s, with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore the slightly rumpled look of someone who cared more about substance than style. It sounded like it came from personal experience. Elena considered lying, then decided she was tired of hiding. "I'm going through a divorce. My husband, ex-husband, tried to get me to sign a discretion clause along with the settlement. When I refused, he wasn't happy." "I see." Professor Reeves leaned back in his chair. "Are you represented by counsel?" Elena almost laughed. "On my salary? I'm representing myself and hoping for the best." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe or concern. "Miss Rodriguez, I don't usually do this, but would you be interested in some additional reading? There are some cases you might find relevant to your situation." "I'd appreciate that, thank you." He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "My office hours are Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, but if you need to discuss anything urgent, you can reach me at this number." Sometimes it helps to have someone who understands the law look over important documents. Elena took the card, studying his handwriting. "Why are you helping me?" Professor Reeves was quiet for a moment. "Because 20 years ago, I watched someone I cared about get steamrolled by lawyers who knew she couldn't fight back. I swore I'd never stand by and watch it happen again if I could help it." That evening, Elena was reviewing the cases Professor Reeves had recommended when her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach clench. "Marcus." "Elena, we need to talk," he said without preamble. His voice sounded strained, almost panicked. "About what?" "About what you said to Jennifer Walsh." Elena frowned. Jennifer Walsh was a reporter for the city's business journal, someone Elena had never met. "I don't know what you're talking about. She called me today asking about our divorce. She wanted to know about the allegations that I'd abandoned my wife for someone with better social connections. She mentioned your name specifically." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Marcus, I never spoke to any reporter." "Then how does she know details about our marriage? Details that could only have come from you." "I don't know." Elena's voice rose. "Maybe she found out some other way. Maybe Victoria." "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't you dare bring Victoria into this. She has nothing to do with whatever game you're playing." "Game?" Elena stood up, pacing her small living room. "You think I'm playing games? Marcus, I'm trying to rebuild my life. I'm going to school, I'm working, I'm staying out of your way just like you wanted. I have no idea how this reporter." "The partners are asking questions, Elena. Judge Morrison, Victoria's father, is concerned about potential negative publicity affecting the firm's reputation. If this story runs," Elena realized what he was really saying, "you could lose the partnership." "Yes. And it's all because you couldn't just take the settlement and disappear quietly." The accusation hit her like a slap. "I didn't talk to any reporter, Marcus. But even if I had, why is that my problem? You're the one who abandoned his wife. You're the one who should be worried about how that looks." "Elena, please. I'm asking you, I'm begging you. Call Jennifer Walsh and tell her it was all a misunderstanding. Tell her we grew apart, that it was mutual, that there's no story here." Elena sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "And if I don't?" The silence stretched long enough that Elena wondered if the call had dropped. "If you don't," Marcus said finally, "I'll have to protect myself. My career, Victoria's reputation, both our futures. I'll do whatever it takes." The threat was clear, even if he hadn't said it explicitly. "Goodbye, Marcus," Elena said and hung up. She sat in her apartment for a long time, staring at Professor Reeves's business card. Finally, she dialed the number he'd written on the back. "Daniel Reeves." "Professor Reeves? This is Elena Rodriguez. I'm sorry to call so late, but I think I might need that help you offered." The next morning, Elena met Professor Reeves at a small cafe near campus. She'd barely slept, and her hands shook slightly as she stirred her coffee. "Tell me everything," he said gently. Elena laid out the whole situation. The divorce, the settlement, the discretion clause, and now the mysterious reporter. When she finished, Professor Reeves was quiet for a long moment. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. During your marriage, did Marcus ever use information about his clients or cases to influence decisions? Did he ever mention specific details about settlements or legal strategies? Elena frowned. Sometimes. He used to talk about work a lot, especially when he was stressed. Why? Because Jennifer Walsh doesn't usually cover divorce stories. She covers corporate legal news. If she's asking about your marriage, it's because she's looking into something bigger. A cold dread was building in Elena's chest. What kind of something bigger? Professor Reeves leaned forward. I did some research last night. Caldwell, Brooks and Associates has been representing several high-profile clients in some very lucrative settlements lately. If there's any suggestion of impropriety, insider information, conflicts of interest, anything that might compromise their ethical standing, it could be a much bigger story than one lawyer's messy divorce. Elena stared at him. You think Marcus is involved in something illegal? I think Marcus is scared about more than just losing a partnership. And I think he's going to do everything in his power to make sure you can't damage him, whether you actually know anything damaging or not. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk. This is Jennifer Walsh from City Business Journal. I'd like to speak with you about your ex-husband's recent cases. Can we meet today? It's important. Asterisk. Elena showed the message to Professor Reeves. His expression grew grim. Elena, you're about to be in the middle of something much bigger than a divorce. If Marcus is involved in anything questionable, and if he thinks you might know about it, he's going to try to discredit you before you can say anything. And with his resources and connections. He could destroy me, Elena finished. Yes. But, Professor Reeves hesitated, then reached across the table and touched her hand gently. If he really is involved in something corrupt, and if you help expose it, you might be able to help a lot of people who've been hurt by whatever he's doing. Elena looked down at his hand covering hers. It was warm, steady, completely different from Marcus's increasingly cold touch in those final months of their marriage. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice. You can try to disappear, hope this all blows over, and probably spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Or you can meet with Jennifer Walsh, find out what she knows, and decide if you want to be part of stopping something that might be hurting innocent people. Elena thought about the woman she'd been 6 weeks ago, afraid, diminished, willing to accept whatever scraps Marcus threw her way. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming, the one taking business law classes, the one who'd stood up to Marcus in the coffee shop, the one who'd refused to sign away her right to tell her own story. If I do this, she said slowly, there's no going back. Marcus will come after me with everything he has. Probably. I could lose everything. My job, my apartment, any chance at a normal life. It's possible. Elena looked into Professor Reeves's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Someone who believed in her capacity to be brave. But if I don't do this, if I just hide and hope for the best, I'll never know who I really am. I'll never know what I'm actually capable of. That's also true. Elena pulled out her phone and typed a response to Jennifer Walsh. Asterisk, I can meet you this afternoon. But I want my attorney present. Asterisk. She showed the message to Professor Reeves before sending it. Elena, he said quietly, I should tell you, I'm not really an attorney anymore. I used to practice corporate law, but I left the profession 8 years ago to teach. I still have my license, but I haven't taken a case in years. Elena studied his face. Why did you leave? Because I got tired of watching powerful people use the law to hurt people who couldn't fight back. I got tired of being part of a system that values money over justice. Elena thought about that for a moment. Will you help me anyway? Yes, he said without hesitation. But Elena, you need to understand, once we meet with this reporter, once we start down this path, your life is going to change completely. There's no telling where this leads or what the consequences will be. Elena looked out the cafe window at the city she'd lived in her entire adult life, at the life she'd built around being Marcus Rivera's wife. Tomorrow, she might lose everything. But she might also finally discover who Elena Rodriguez really was when she stopped letting other people define her worth. Send the message, Professor Reeves said softly. Elena hit send. 3 hours later, she sat across from Jennifer Walsh in a hotel conference room, with Professor Reeves beside her and a digital recorder on the table between them. Jennifer was younger than Elena had expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd found something big. Mrs. Rodriguez, Jennifer began, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. But I need you to know that your ex-husband's firm is under federal investigation for a pattern of fraudulent settlement practices. They've been deliberately withholding information from clients, manipulating vulnerable parties into accepting inadequate settlements, and in some cases, actively working against their clients' interests for personal gain. Elena felt the room spinning. How do you know this? Because 3 weeks ago, a whistleblower came forward with evidence. Internal emails, recorded conversations, financial records. The kind of evidence that builds federal cases. Who was the whistleblower? Jennifer Walsh smiled grimly. Victoria Morrison, your ex-husband's fiancée. Elena stared at her in shock. That's impossible. Victoria is the daughter of a federal judge, yes. She's also a former prosecutor who's been investigating her own father's court for the past 2 years. Judge Morrison has been taking bribes to influence settlements in cases handled by Caldwell, Brooks, and Associates. Victoria's been gathering evidence, and when she realized Marcus was involved, Jennifer paused. Let's just say she's very motivated to see justice done, even if it means destroying her own family in the process. Elena's mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew about Marcus's new life, about Victoria, about the reasons for their divorce, all of it was crumbling. Mrs. Rodriguez, Jennifer continued, Victoria Morrison didn't steal your husband. She targeted him. She's been using him to get evidence against her father and his firm. And now she needs your help to finish what she started. Elena looked at Professor Reeves, who was staring at Jennifer in amazement. What kind of help? Elena asked. Marcus has been keeping records at home. Financial documents, client files, communications with Judge Morrison. Victoria has been photographing everything she can find, but she needs someone who knows Marcus's patterns, someone who might know where he'd hide the most incriminating evidence. You want me to help you search his apartment. We want you to help us save the victims of their fraud. Families who lost their homes because they were manipulated into accepting settlements that were a fraction of what they deserved. Elderly people who were cheated out of their life savings. Workers who were injured and then convinced to accept inadequate compensation. Elena thought about all the nights Marcus had come home stressed about cases, all the times he'd mentioned how much money the firm was making, all the expensive dinners and clothes and watches that had seemed like innocent rewards for his hard work. If I help you, she said slowly, what happens to Marcus? If we're right about the scope of this fraud, he's looking at federal conspiracy charges. Probably 10 to 15 years in prison. Elena felt something crack inside her chest. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the cruelty and the abandonment, some part of her still loved the man she'd married. The thought of him in prison. Mrs. Rodriguez, Jennifer said gently, I know this is hard, but Marcus made his choices. He chose to participate in this fraud. He chose to hurt innocent people for money. And he chose to use you as cover, making you complicit without your knowledge. What do you mean? Your joint tax returns, your shared bank accounts, your name on some of the financial documents. If this had gone undiscovered, you could have been charged as a co-conspirator. Marcus was setting you up to take the fall if everything collapsed. Elena stared at her. He was going to let me go to prison for something I didn't even know about. Victoria found emails discussing exactly that scenario. Marcus and his partners were planning to claim you handled the financial side of things, that you were the one who came up with the fraudulent schemes. The divorce was part of it. Create distance between you two so it would be easier to blame everything on the bitter ex-wife. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that Elena couldn't even process it fully. Marcus hadn't just abandoned her for another woman. He'd been systematically destroying her life to protect himself from consequences she didn't even know existed. I'll help you, she said, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it. Professor Reeves squeezed her hand under the table. Elena, are you sure? Once you agree to this. I'm sure. Elena looked directly at Jennifer Walsh. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I want immunity from prosecution for anything Marcus might have involved me in without my knowledge. Full immunity in writing. Done. Second, I want protection. If Marcus finds out I'm helping you, he'll try to destroy me. I want witness protection, or whatever you call it. We can arrange that. And third, Elena paused, looking at Professor Reeves. I want Daniel, Professor Reeves, to be my official legal counsel throughout this process. If he's willing. Professor Reeves looked surprised. Elena, I told you I haven't practiced in years. You're the only person who's helped me without wanting anything in return. You're the only one I trust. Elena turned back to Jennifer. Those are my conditions. Jennifer Walsh smiled. Mrs. Rodriguez, I think you're going to be an excellent witness. As they shook hands, Elena realized she'd just committed to a path that would either destroy her completely or transform her into someone she'd never imagined she could be. Either way, there was no going back. That evening, as Elena sat in her apartment reviewing the immunity agreement Professor Reeves had helped her negotiate, her phone rang. Marcus again. Elena, I know what you're doing. His voice was cold, dangerous in a way she'd never heard before. I don't know what you mean. Stay away from Jennifer Walsh. Stay away from the reporters and the federal investigators and anyone else who's trying to destroy everything I've worked for. Or what? Or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are. The drinking problem you hid during our marriage. The money you stole from your family's restaurant before it went bankrupt. The real reason your parents died, because you were supposed to be driving that night, but you were too drunk to get behind the wheel. Each lie hit her like a physical blow, but Elena realized something that surprised her. She wasn't afraid anymore. Go ahead, she said calmly. Tell whatever lies you want. Because tomorrow, the whole world is going to know exactly what kind of person you really are. Elena hung up and immediately called Professor Reeves. Daniel, we need to move faster than we planned. Marcus knows something's happening, and he's getting desperate. How desperate? Elena thought about the venom in Marcus's voice, the lies he was willing to tell, the fact that he'd been planning to send her to prison for his crimes. Desperate enough to do anything. Heartbreak to potential federal prison time. And Elena is about to enter a world where the comfortable illusions of her old life will be completely shattered. The next morning, Elena arrived at Henderson and Associates to find two FBI agents waiting in the parking lot. Her heart hammered as she approached her car, but Special Agent Sarah Chun, no relation to Diane, simply handed her a business card and spoke quietly. Mrs. Rodriguez, we need you to act completely normal today. Go to work, follow your usual routine. Agent Walsh will contact you tonight with further instructions. Elena nodded, trying to look casual as she walked into the building. Inside, Diane took one look at her face and immediately ushered her into the supply closet. Honey, you look like you've seen the devil himself. What's wrong? Elena glanced around the cramped space filled with paper clips and printer ink, then made a decision that surprised them both. Diane, if I tell you something, can you keep it completely confidential? I mean, even if people pressure you, even if it gets uncomfortable. Diane's expression grew serious. Of course. What's going on? In whispered tones, Elena explained everything. The federal investigation, Marcus's involvement in fraud, the discovery that her entire marriage had been built on lies. When she finished, Diane was staring at her in shock. Sweet Jesus, Elena. You're going up against federal criminals. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. But Diane, I need you to know, things might get complicated around here. If anyone comes asking questions about me, if Marcus tries to contact you, if anything strange happens. I'll handle it, Diane said firmly. But Elena, you need backup. Real backup. Not just that professor of yours, as nice as he seems. What do you mean? Diane was quiet for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. My ex-husband, the faculty one I told you about, he became a federal judge after our divorce. Judge William Chin. If things get really bad, if you need someone with serious influence, you call me. Understand? Elena stared at her. In 2 years of working together, Diane had never mentioned being married to a federal judge. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I've spent 25 years making sure people see me for who I am, not who I used to be married to. Diane squeezed Elena's hand. But sometimes, honey, you use every weapon you've got. Elena was still processing this revelation when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk, check your email. V asterisk. Elena's work computer showed a new message from a generic Gmail account. No subject line, just an attachment and a brief message. Asterisk, thought you should see this. Meeting moved to tonight, 7 p.m., same location. Tell no one else. Asterisk. The attachment was a video file. Elena plugged in her headphones and hit play. The video showed Marcus in what looked like Judge Morrison's home office, talking animatedly with an older man Elena recognized from newspaper photos as Victoria's father. The audio was crystal clear. The Patterson settlement was a gold mine, Marcus was saying. Family of 4, father paralyzed in the construction accident. We convinced them to accept $200,000 instead of the $7 million they could have gotten at trial. And your cut? Judge Morrison asked. $40,000, plus the guarantee that Patterson Construction keeps using our firm for all their liability cases. It's a beautiful system, Judge. We keep the settlements low, the corporations stay happy, and everyone gets paid. Elena felt sick. The Patterson case, she remembered Marcus talking about it, how proud he'd been of negotiating a settlement that avoided a lengthy trial. He'd made it sound like he was helping the family avoid the stress of court proceedings. The video continued with Marcus discussing other cases, other families whose lives had been destroyed by fraudulent settlements. Each story was worse than the last. But the most devastating moment came at the end, when Judge Morrison asked about the wife situation. Elena won't be a problem much longer, Marcus said confidently. I've got documentation showing she's been struggling with alcohol and depression since her parents died. If she tries to cause trouble, we'll have her committed for psychiatric evaluation. By the time she gets out, if she gets out, no one will believe anything she says. Elena ripped off her headphones, her hands shaking. Marcus hadn't just been planning to frame her for financial crimes. He'd been planning to have her declared mentally incompetent. Her phone rang. Professor Reeves. Elena, where are you? At work. Why? Because Marcus just filed an emergency restraining order against you. He's claiming you've been stalking him, making threats, exhibiting erratic behavior. The hearing is this afternoon. Elena's world tilted. That's impossible. I haven't contacted him except when he called me. I know, but he's got witnesses lined up to testify about your unstable behavior. Elena, if this restraining order goes through, it'll be the first step in building a case for you being mentally incompetent to testify. Professor Reeves, Daniel, I just saw a video. Marcus has been planning this for months. He's been setting me up to be declared mentally ill if I became a problem. The silence on the other end stretched too long. Daniel, Elena, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't go home. Don't go to your usual places. Come to my office immediately. And Elena, bring whatever personal documents you have with you, passport, birth certificate, social security card. Everything. Why? Because I think we're about to have to disappear you before Marcus can have you committed. Elena looked around the office where she'd felt safe for 2 years. Diane was watching her with obvious concern, and through the window, Elena could see the FBI agents still sitting in an unmarked car. Daniel, what if this is all part of some bigger plan? What if the FBI, the investigation, all of it? What if Marcus is somehow controlling this whole thing? What do you mean? I mean, what if he knows about Victoria? What if he's been feeding her false information? What if this whole federal investigation is just an elaborate way to get me to incriminate myself? The possibility hit her like a physical blow. Victoria could be playing both sides. The federal investigation could be a sham. Elena could be walking into a trap that would destroy her completely. Elena, meet me at my office. Don't trust anyone else until we figure this out. Elena hung up and walked over to Diane's desk. I need to leave. If anyone asks where I went. You never came in today, Diane said firmly. I haven't seen you since yesterday. Elena grabbed her purse and headed for the back exit, avoiding the FBI agents in the parking lot. But as she reached her car, another vehicle pulled up beside her, a black SUV with tinted windows. Victoria Morrison stepped out. Up close, Victoria was even more stunning than Elena had imagined. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed, with the kind of natural confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. Everything Elena wasn't. Mrs. Rodriguez, we need to talk. I'm not talking to you without my attorney present. Your attorney is the one who sent me. Victoria pulled out her phone and showed Elena a text from Professor Reeves. Asterisk, Victoria is legit. Trust her. Something's gone wrong with the original plan. Asterisk. Elena stared at the message, trying to decide if she could trust it. Mrs. Rodriguez, Marcus knows about the investigation. He's known for weeks. He's been feeding us false information while building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent. The restraining order hearing this afternoon? It's just the beginning. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't all some elaborate setup? Victoria was quiet for a moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small recording device. Because 3 hours ago, Marcus tried to have me killed. She pressed play, and Elena heard Marcus's voice, tinny but clear through the small speaker. The federal investigation is contained, But Elena is still a problem. She knows too much, and she's too stubborn to just disappear quietly. We need a permanent solution. What kind of permanent solution? The second voice was unfamiliar. The kind that makes sure she never testifies about anything, ever. Make it look like suicide. The divorce drove her over the edge. She couldn't handle the shame of losing everything. It'll be tragic but believable. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. He's trying to have me killed. Yes. And if I hadn't been recording our conversation, if I hadn't realized what he was planning. Victoria's voice shook slightly. Mrs. Rodriguez, I've been undercover for 2 years. I've seen Marcus lie, cheat, and steal from innocent families. But ordering your murder? That's when I realized he's not just corrupt, he's genuinely dangerous. Elena looked around the parking lot, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. What do? We get you somewhere safe, and then we finish this investigation the right way. With or without the FBI's help. What do you mean, with or without their help? Victoria's expression hardened. I mean, some of the agents on this case might be compromised. I mean, Marcus has connections throughout the federal courthouse, including judges who could make evidence disappear. I mean, we're on our own. Elena thought about Professor Reeves, about Diane, about the life she was about to leave behind entirely. If I do this, if I help you finish this investigation, what happens to me afterward? Even if we expose Marcus, even if we stop the fraud, I'll have no life to go back to. No job, no home, no identity that isn't tied to being a federal witness. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Rodriguez, can I ask you something? What? When you were married to Marcus, did you ever feel like you were living someone else's life? Like you were playing a role instead of being yourself? Elena thought about the dinner parties where she'd struggled to fit in, the conversations where she'd felt like an outsider, the constant sense that she wasn't quite enough for the life Marcus wanted. Every day. Then maybe losing that life isn't the worst thing that could happen to you. Maybe it's the best. Elena looked at Victoria, this woman who'd initially seemed like everything she wasn't, everything Marcus had wanted instead of her, and realized something unexpected. You've been pretending too, haven't you? This whole perfect, sophisticated persona, it's not really you. Victoria smiled for the first time since Elena had met her, and the expression transformed her completely. My real name is Vicky Morrisonchin. I grew up in my grandmother's restaurant in Chinatown, putting myself through law school by waiting tables and tutoring rich kids in legal writing. The designer clothes, the perfect hair, the connections, it's all borrowed for this investigation. Elena stared at her. Morrisonchin, are you related to? Judge William Chun is my uncle. When I realized my father was taking bribes from his court, Uncle Bill helped me get placed in the prosecutor's office to investigate. I've been pretending to be the perfect privileged daughter while gathering evidence to destroy my own family. The pieces clicked into place. That's why Diane offered to help me. She's your aunt. Former aunt, technically. But yes, Aunt Diane has been keeping an eye on you since you started working at Henderson and Associates. She was the one who suggested you for the job in the first place. Elena felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. How long have you people been watching me? Since Marcus first started working on cases that went through my father's court. We knew he was married, knew he had access to information and financial records we'd need to build a case. But Elena, Victoria's voice softened. We never planned for you to be hurt like this. We never expected Marcus to be this vicious, or for you to be this strong. Strong? Elena almost laughed. I've been falling apart for months. You stood up to Marcus when he tried to buy your silence. You refused to sign his discretion clause. You went back to school, started building a new life, fought for yourself when everyone expected you to just disappear. Victoria paused. Mrs. Rodriguez, Elena, you're the strongest person I've met in 2 years of doing this job. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Asterisk, Elena, I know you think you're being brave, but you're in over your head. Come home. Let me protect you before this gets any worse. Asterisk. Elena showed the message to Victoria, who read it and cursed. He's trying to lure you somewhere he can control the situation. Elena, we have maybe an hour before the restraining order hearing. After that, if he gets the order approved, he can have you picked up by police for violating it just by existing in the same city. What's the plan? Victoria pulled out a tablet and showed Elena a detailed floor plan. Marcus is keeping the most incriminating evidence at his new apartment. Financial records, communications with my father, proof of the fraudulent settlements. Tonight, while he's at the restraining order hearing, We're going to get it. You want me to break into his apartment? I want you to use your key to enter the apartment you're still legally entitled to access as his wife. The divorce isn't final yet. It's not breaking and entering if you have legal access. Elena stared at the floor plan, then at Victoria. And if we get caught, Marcus will try to have us both killed. But if we don't try, he'll try to have you killed anyway, and dozens of families will never get justice for what he's done to them. Elena thought about the video she'd seen that morning, about the families whose lives had been destroyed while Marcus got rich. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, afraid, diminished, willing to accept whatever scraps she was offered. That woman would never have considered breaking into her ex-husband's apartment to steal evidence of federal crimes. But that woman was gone. What do you need me to do? Victoria smiled, and Elena saw something fierce and determined in her eyes. I need you to help me prove that sometimes the only way to get justice is to take it yourself. An hour later, Elena sat in Professor Reeves's office, watching him pace nervously as Victoria laid out their plan. This is insane, he said for the third time. Elena, if you get caught. If I don't try, Marcus wins, Elena cut him off. He destroys evidence. Innocent families never get justice. And I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder waiting for him to decide I'm still a threat. Professor Reeves stopped pacing and looked at her intently. Elena, 3 months ago you were afraid to send back an incorrect order at a restaurant. Now you're planning to burglarize a federal criminal's apartment. Don't you think this transformation is happening a little fast? Elena considered the question seriously. Daniel, 3 months ago I thought my biggest problem was that I wasn't sophisticated enough for my husband's dinner parties. Now I know my husband was planning to frame me for federal crimes and then have me murdered to cover his tracks. Yes, I'm transforming fast because I have to. She stood up and moved closer to him. I spent 17 years making myself smaller so Marcus could feel bigger. I supported his dreams while forgetting I was allowed to have my own. I was so grateful for his love that I never stopped to wonder if I deserved better. Professor Reeves watched her carefully. Well, I do deserve better. I deserve to live without fear. I deserve to build a life on my own terms. And I deserve to help stop people who hurt innocent families for money. Elena paused. But I can't do this alone. I need someone I trust watching my back. Elena, I need you, Daniel. Not just as my attorney, as my partner in this. The word hung in the air between them. Partner. Not just professional, not just legal, but something deeper. Professor Reeves was quiet for a long moment. If we do this, if we help Victoria break into Marcus's apartment and steal evidence, we're crossing a line we can never uncross. We're becoming criminals ourselves. Sometimes, Elena said softly, being a good person means being willing to break bad laws. Professor Reeves looked at Victoria, who was watching them both with interest. Ms. Morrison, what's your real assessment of our chances? Honestly, 50-50. Marcus is smart, careful, and well-connected. But he's also arrogant, and he underestimates women. If we're lucky, his arrogance will be his downfall. And if we're not lucky? Victoria's expression grew serious. If we're not lucky, Elena disappears, I get transferred to some dead-end assignment in rural Alaska, and Professor Reeves loses his job and possibly his freedom. Marcus and my father continue destroying families for profit, and no one ever gets justice. Elena reached for Professor Reeves's hand. Daniel, I understand if you can't do this. I understand if it's too much risk, too much. Elena. His voice was gentle but firm. 20 years ago, I let someone I cared about get destroyed by people like Marcus because I was too afraid to fight back. I've regretted it every day since. He squeezed her hand. I'm not making that mistake again. Elena felt something warm and strong flow between them. Not just attraction, though that was definitely there, but partnership. True partnership between equals. So we're really doing this? Elena asked. Victoria grinned. We're really doing this. But Elena, there's one more thing you need to know before we commit. What? Marcus isn't the only one who's been underestimating you. I have two. Victoria pulled out another tablet, this one showing financial records. I've been going through your joint tax returns, your shared accounts, the financial documents Marcus has been using. Elena, you didn't just support Marcus through law school. You managed all his finances, handled his accounting, organized his case files. You know his system better than anyone, including him. Elena frowned. I don't understand. You're not just helping us break into his apartment. You're going to be the one who knows where to find everything. You're going to be the one who understands his filing system, his hiding places, his security measures. Elena, you're not just a witness in this case. You're our secret weapon. Elena stared at the financial records, recognizing her own handwriting in the margins, her own organizational system in the filing categories. For 12 years, she'd been managing Marcus's professional life so efficiently that he'd probably forgotten how much he depended on her systems. He never changed the passwords, she realized. He never reorganized anything. He's still using all the systems I set up. Exactly, Victoria said. Marcus has been so focused on covering his illegal activities that he never bothered to secure himself against the one person who knows all his legitimate activities. Elena felt a surge of something that might have been excitement. For the first time in months, she wasn't just surviving Marcus's betrayal. She was about to use her own competence to bring him down. When do we start? She asked. Victoria checked her watch. Marcus's restraining order hearing starts in 2 hours. That gives us a 3-hour window to get in, find everything, and get out. And after that, we change the world. Elena looked between Victoria and Professor Reeves. These two people who'd become her unlikely allies in a war she'd never wanted to fight. 6 months ago, she'd been a woman so diminished by her marriage that she'd forgotten she was allowed to have opinions. Now she was about to commit federal crimes to bring down a corrupt judicial conspiracy. The transformation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Let's go change the world, Elena said. As they prepared to leave Professor Reeves's office, Elena's phone rang one more time. Marcus. Elena, this is your last chance. Come to the courthouse. Tell the judge you've been under stress, that you made some poor decisions, that you want to work things out. I'll drop the restraining order. We'll settle the divorce quietly, and you can disappear with enough money to start over somewhere else. Elena looked at Victoria and Professor Reeves, both watching her intently. And if I don't? Then after tonight, you won't have any choices left at all. Elena thought about the woman she'd been that morning, afraid and uncertain. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming, strong, determined, unwilling to be intimidated. Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman you married. I'm not the same woman you abandoned. And I'm definitely not the woman you can threaten into silence. Elena, I'm the woman who's going to make sure you face consequences for what you've done. To me, to those families, to everyone you've hurt for money. Elena hung up and turned off her phone. Ready? Victoria asked. Elena Rodriguez, accountant, student, federal witness, and apparently now criminal conspirator, straightened her shoulders and headed for the door. Let's go get justice. Marcus's apartment was in one of the city's most exclusive buildings, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like a monument to success. Elena stood across the street with Victoria and Professor Reeves, studying the entrance where she'd once felt so out of place during their brief visits. Security cameras cover the lobby and elevators, Victoria said, checking her tablet. But Elena still has legitimate access as his wife. The divorce isn't final. We go in confident, like we belong there. Elena's hands were shaking slightly. What if he comes back early from the hearing? He won't, Professor Reeves said, though something in his voice seemed strained. Restraining order hearings can take hours, especially when there's no opposing counsel present. Elena looked at him sharply. What do you mean no opposing counsel? You said you'd handle the legal response. Professor Reeves avoided her eyes. I filed a motion for continuance. It buys us time. But you're not actually opposing the restraining order? Elena, if I show up to that hearing, it confirms that you're working with an attorney, which means you're taking this seriously. It's better for Marcus to think you're isolated and scared. Something cold settled in Elena's stomach, but Victoria was already moving toward the building. We need to go. Now. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with a concierge who barely glanced up as Elena approached the elevator. She still remembered the security code for the private elevator to Marcus's floor, their wedding anniversary, which he'd never bothered to change. The apartment was exactly as she remembered, minimalist, expensive, sterile. Like a showroom rather than a home. Elena had never felt comfortable here during their marriage, and now she understood why. This wasn't a place where real people lived. It was a stage set for Marcus's new identity. His home office is through here, Elena said, leading them down the hallway. He keeps all his important files in the safe behind his law degree. But when they reached the office, Elena stopped cold. The room had been completely ransacked. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered across the floor, the safe standing open and empty. Someone got here first, Victoria whispered. Elena knelt among the scattered papers, recognizing fragments of documents she'd helped organize years ago. This doesn't make sense. Marcus is obsessively neat. He would never leave his office like this. Professor Reeves was studying the safe. Elena, what was the combination? Our wedding date and my birthday combined. Why? Because this safe wasn't forced open. Someone who knew the combination opened it. Elena stood up slowly, pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. The only people who knew that combination were Marcus and me. And anyone Marcus might have told, Victoria added. But her voice sounded strange, like she was reading from a script. Elena looked around the destroyed office more carefully. The chaos looked deliberate, theatrical. Papers were scattered, but they were the wrong papers. Old tax returns, utility bills, nothing important. The really sensitive documents would have been in the locked filing cabinet, which was untouched. This is staged, Elena realized. Someone wanted us to think the place had been robbed, but they didn't actually take anything important. Elena, Professor Reeves said quietly, we should leave. Now. But Elena was already moving toward the filing cabinet. The lock was a simple combination lock, Marcus's social security number, which she still remembered. Inside, everything was exactly where she'd left it years ago, organized in her own system. The evidence is all here, she said, pulling out folders. Financial records, client communications, everything Victoria said we needed. Whoever staged this robbery didn't know about this cabinet. Elena opened the first folder and found herself staring at documents that made her world tilt on its axis. Bank statements showing regular payments to a private investigator, starting 18 years ago. The payments had been made monthly, without interruption, for nearly 2 decades. The investigator's reports were attached. They detailed Elena's daily routines, her work schedules, her family relationships, her financial situation. Every aspect of her life, documented and tracked, starting from when she was 16 years old. Elena, we need to go, Professor Reeves said again, but his voice sounded distant. Elena kept reading. The reports showed that Marcus had been watching her for 2 years before they'd ever met. He'd known about her parents' financial problems, her dreams of going to college, her shifts at the family restaurant. He'd known exactly when and where to accidentally meet her. Their entire relationship had been orchestrated. But the worst was yet to come. Elena found a folder labeled Contingency Plans and opened it with trembling hands. Inside were detailed psychiatric evaluations, not of Elena's actual mental state, but fabricated reports designed to make her appear unstable. Medical records that had been falsified. Financial documents that had been altered to make it look like she'd been stealing from her family's restaurant. And at the bottom of the file, a report dated 3 weeks ago. Subject continues to resist manipulation. Recommend acceleration of contingency protocols. Permanent solution may be necessary. Elena looked up to find Professor Reeves and Victoria watching her with expressions she couldn't read. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Known what? Victoria replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Known that my entire life has been a lie. Known that Marcus has been manipulating me since I was 16 years old. Known that my marriage, my career, even meeting both of you, all of it was planned. Elena stood up, the files clutched in her hands. The federal investigation isn't real, is it? You're not actually trying to bring down corruption. You're part of whatever Marcus has been planning all along. Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. Elena, you're misunderstanding. Am I? Elena backed toward the door. Let me guess. The plan was to use me to gather evidence that would implicate me in Marcus's crimes. Make me think I was helping to expose corruption while actually building a case against myself. Then, when I was completely isolated and desperate, I'd conveniently have a breakdown and either be committed or... She looked at Professor Reeves. Or disappear entirely. Professor Reeves stepped forward, his face anguished. Elena, please. Let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to me from the moment we met. How you made me trust you, made me think you cared about me, while you were working with Marcus to destroy me. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Daniel? Elena's voice broke on his name. Tell me how it's different from what I think. Professor Reeves was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely audible. 20 years ago, I did let someone I cared about get destroyed by people like Marcus. But Elena, it wasn't because I was too afraid to help her. It was because I was one of the people destroying her. Elena felt the last of her strength drain away. What? I was a corporate attorney. I specialized in discrediting witnesses in class action lawsuits. My job was to find their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their secrets, and use them to make sure they could never testify effectively. He looked at her with eyes full of pain. I was very good at it. The woman you mentioned, the one who got hurt. Her name was Sarah Chun. She was a whistleblower trying to expose fraud at a pharmaceutical company. She had evidence that could have saved thousands of lives. I destroyed her credibility so thoroughly that she ended up in a psychiatric facility. She died there 3 years later. Elena stared at him. Sarah Chun. Diane's daughter. Yes, Diane's daughter. Professor Reeves's voice was barely a whisper. When I realized what I'd done, what I'd become, I left corporate law and started teaching. I thought I could make amends by helping students understand ethics, by making sure they didn't make my mistakes. But you're still making them, Elena said, understanding flooding through her. You're still destroying people for money. No. Professor Reeves shook his head desperately. Elena, I was trying to protect you. When Marcus approached me 6 months ago, when he offered me money to watch you and report back, I thought I could control the situation. I thought I could keep you safe while gathering evidence of what he was really planning. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You thought you could protect me by lying to me? By making me fall in love with someone who was reporting my every move to my ex-husband. The words hung in the air between them. Professor Reeves's face went white. Elena, did you report back about our conversations, Daniel? About the business law classes, about my dreams of getting a degree? Did you tell Marcus about every moment of trust, every time I opened up to you? At first, yes. But Elena, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. Elena's voice was ice. I understand that everyone I've trusted has been lying to me. I understand that my entire adult life has been one long manipulation. I understand that the woman I thought I was becoming, strong, independent, capable, was just another role in Marcus's game. She looked at Victoria. And you? What's your real story? Are you actually a prosecutor, or is that just another lie? Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. I am a prosecutor, but I'm not investigating my father. I'm working with him. We've been documenting Marcus's evolution from petty fraud to the kind of dangerous criminal who orders murders. You were supposed to be our final piece of evidence. Evidence of what? Evidence that Marcus Rivera is willing to kill to protect his secrets. Evidence that will put him away forever while protecting our actual operations. Elena felt something break inside her chest. What actual operations? The kind that make sure justice goes to the people who can afford it, Victoria said simply. My father doesn't take bribes, Elena. He takes payments to ensure that the right people win their cases. Marcus was useful for a while, but he's become unstable. He's a liability. Elena looked between them, Professor Reeves, who'd been reporting her every move while making her believe he cared about her, and Victoria, who'd used her own investigation to eliminate a competitor rather than seek actual justice. So what now? Elena asked. Now that I know the truth, what's the plan? Kill me and blame it on Marcus? Frame me for something and have me committed? Or just let me go crazy trying to convince people that my entire life has been a lie? Professor Reeves stepped toward her, his face desperate. Elena, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm telling you the truth now. I started this as a job, but somewhere along the way. He stopped, struggling with words. Somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Really fell in love with you. And I've been trying to figure out how to get you out of this without destroying you. By lying to me? By making me believe you cared about me while you were selling information about me to the man who's been manipulating my entire life. By gathering evidence that would prove Marcus's crimes while keeping you alive long enough to escape. Elena, I have recordings of every conversation I had with Marcus. I have documentation of the payments he made to me, the instructions he gave me, the plans he was making for you. I was building a case that would destroy him. Elena stared at him. Prove it. Professor Reeves pulled out his phone and played a recording. Marcus's voice, clear and unmistakable. The divorce was just the first step. Elena knows too much about my finances, my connections, my methods. She's always been too smart for her own good. Once she's discredited or eliminated, we can move forward with the expansion plans. And if Professor Reeves can't control her? Victoria's voice. Then we implement the permanent solution. Make it look like the stress of the divorce drove her to suicide. Tragic but believable. Elena listened to her own death being planned with the casual efficiency of a business meeting. There's more, Professor Reeves said. Hours of recordings. Evidence of murders, fraud, corruption going back decades. Elena, you were never supposed to survive this. I've been trying to keep you alive while gathering enough evidence to destroy everyone involved. Elena looked at Victoria. Including her? Especially her. Victoria Morrison isn't trying to reform corruption, she's trying to monopolize it. Victoria smiled coldly. Which is why, unfortunately, neither of you will be leaving this apartment. She pulled out a gun. Elena's mind raced. They were trapped in Marcus's apartment, 30 floors above the street, with a woman who'd just revealed herself to be a killer. Professor Reeves might be telling the truth about trying to protect her, or he might be playing one final manipulation. Either way, Elena was about to die for the crime of being inconvenient to powerful people. But as Victoria raised the gun, Elena realized something that almost made her laugh. She'd spent her entire adult life afraid of being inadequate, afraid of not being smart enough or sophisticated enough or good enough for the world Marcus inhabited. Now she was about to be murdered by that world, and all she felt was rage. You know what the really funny part is? Elena said, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her heart. Elena, don't, Professor Reeves started. The funny part is that you all spent so much time manipulating me, planning around me, trying to control me, that you forgot to consider one possibility. Which is? Victoria asked. Elena smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a real smile. You forgot to consider that I might actually be exactly as smart as you were afraid I was. Elena pressed a button on her phone. Suddenly, the apartment filled with the sound of voices. Their voices from the conversation they'd just had. Elena had been recording everything since they'd entered the apartment. And unlike the rest of you, Elena continued, I actually sent my recordings to someone who can be trusted. Victoria's face went white. That's impossible. You've been isolated. You don't have any real allies. I have Diane, Elena said simply. And Diane has a federal judge for an ex-husband. A real federal judge, not a corrupt one. Judge William Chin, who's been investigating judicial corruption for the past 5 years and would be very interested in recordings of a fake prosecutor planning murder in a corrupt lawyer's apartment. Elena held up her phone, showing that she'd been streaming everything live to a secure number. Hello, Uncle Bill, she said to the phone. I think you're going to want to hear this. Victoria cursed and swung the gun toward Elena, but Professor Reeves moved faster than Elena had thought possible. He tackled Victoria, and they crashed into Marcus's expensive coffee table as the gun went off. Elena dropped to the floor, her ears ringing from the gunshot. When she looked up, Professor Reeves was on top of Victoria, wrestling for control of the weapon. Elena's phone was buzzing. She answered without thinking. Elena? Elena, are you safe? Diane's voice panicked. Diane, Judge Chin has been listening to everything. FBI agents are on their way up. Elena, you need to get out of that apartment right now. I can't leave Daniel. Another gunshot. Elena looked up to see Victoria standing over Professor Reeves, who was clutching his shoulder and bleeding. Elena Rodriguez, Victoria said, turning the gun back toward her. You have been far more trouble than you're worth. Elena closed her eyes, waiting for the impact. Instead, she heard the apartment door explode inward. FBI, drop your weapon. Elena opened her eyes to see federal agents flooding into the apartment. Real ones this time, with Judge Chin right behind them. Victoria looked around at the agents surrounding her, then at Elena, who was still lying on the floor with her phone in her hand. You clever little bitch, Victoria said, almost admiringly, then dropped the gun and raised her hands. Elena crawled over to Professor Reeves, who was pressing his hand against his bleeding shoulder. How bad is it? She asked. I'll live, he said, then looked at her with eyes full of pain that had nothing to do with the gunshot. Elena, I know you probably never want to see me again, but I need you to know, everything I said about falling in love with you was true. Whatever else I lied about, that was real. Elena looked at this man who'd helped Marcus manipulate her, who'd reported her movements and conversations, who'd made her trust him while working against her. This man who'd also risked his life to save her, who'd gathered evidence to bring down corruption, who'd thrown himself between her and a gun. Daniel, she said softly, I believe you about loving me, but love without trust isn't enough. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Professor Reeves closed his eyes. I know. I needed you to know that it was real for me, even if it can never be real for us. As paramedics arrived to treat Professor Reeves's wound, as Victoria was led away in handcuffs, as Judge Chin explained that Marcus had already been arrested at the courthouse on federal conspiracy charges. Elena sat in the wreckage of Marcus's apartment and tried to process what had just happened. Every relationship in her adult life had been built on lies. Her marriage, her friendship with Diane, her connection to Professor Reeves. All of it contaminated by manipulation and hidden agendas. But she was alive. She'd survived 17 years of manipulation, months of terror, and an actual murder attempt. She'd exposed corruption that had hurt countless families, and she'd done it using nothing but her own intelligence and determination. Elena Rodriguez was finally free. She just had no idea who she was supposed to be now. 3 weeks later, Elena sat in a sterile FBI-safe house in a city she'd never seen before, staring at documents that would reshape dozens of legal cases and potentially free innocent people from prison. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt completely hollow. Special Agent Martinez, her FBI handler, spread photos across the table. Your testimony has already led to 17 arrests. Judge Morrison's entire network is collapsing. Marcus is cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence, and we've identified at least 40 cases where settlements were manipulated. Elena nodded without really listening. Outside the window, snow was beginning to fall on streets she didn't recognize in a state whose name she wasn't allowed to know. Mrs. Rodriguez, are you listening? Elena forced herself to focus. Yes. 17 arrests. 40 cases. People getting justice. The Patterson family, remember the construction accident case from the video? They're getting a new trial. They'll probably receive the full $7 million they were entitled to, plus damages for the fraudulent settlement. Elena tried to feel something about this victory. The Patterson family would get their lives back. Children would get the medical care they needed. A father would have proper rehabilitation. It should have mattered more than the fact that she was spending Christmas Eve in witness protection, with no identity, no home, no relationships, and no idea who she was supposed to be. There's something else, Agent Martinez said gently. Professor Reeves has been asking to see you. Elena's stomach clenched. No. He's provided crucial testimony. His recordings were instrumental in. I said no. Elena's voice was sharper than she intended. How many times do I have to tell you people? I don't want to see him. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want messages from him. Agent Martinez held up his hands. Okay, but Elena, you should know, he's refused witness protection. He's staying in the city, testifying openly, despite the fact that Marcus's associates are still unaccounted for. Elena felt a stab of something that might have been concern, but she pushed it down. That's his choice. He's putting himself at considerable risk to make sure the prosecutions succeed. Good for him. Elena stood up and walked to the window. Is there anything else? Any more updates about my wonderful ex-husband's cooperation or my former attorney's heroic testimony? Agent Martinez was quiet for a moment. Elena, I know this is hard. Do you? Elena turned back to him. Do you know what it's like to discover that your entire adult life has been a performance? That every relationship you thought was real was actually surveillance? That the man you thought loved you was literally reporting your conversations to your ex-husband? No, I don't know what that's like. Then don't tell me you know this is hard. Elena sat back down, suddenly exhausted. When can I start my new life? The prosecution phase will take several months. Maybe a year. After that, we can discuss relocation options, new identity paperwork. A year. Elena stared at the ceiling. A year of sitting in safe houses, testifying at trials, reliving the worst period of my life over and over again. Elena, you're a hero. You exposed massive corruption. You're going to save lives, restore justice. I'm going to spend the next year being a professional victim, getting up in courtrooms and explaining how I was too stupid to realize my husband was using me for 17 years. How I was too naive to recognize that my attorney was reporting to my ex-husband. How I was too trusting to see that everyone in my life was lying to me. Elena's voice was getting louder, months of suppressed anger finally boiling over. And at the end of it all, when the trials are over and the appeals are exhausted, I'll get a new name and a new city, and the chance to start over as someone else entirely. Because Elena Rodriguez, the woman who thought she was building a life, who thought she was capable of love and trust and growth, that woman was just a character in someone else's story. Agent Martinez watched her carefully. Is that really what you think? That you were just a victim in all this? Wasn't I? Elena, in the past 6 months, you've exposed federal corruption, survived multiple murder attempts, outmaneuvered people with decades more experience, and provided evidence that's going to change the justice system. You think that was an accident? Elena was quiet for a moment. I think it was desperation. Maybe. But desperation doesn't explain the intelligence you showed, the courage, the way you kept thinking 3 steps ahead of people who underestimated you. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Elena, you weren't just a victim who got lucky. You were a woman who discovered she was stronger than anyone, including herself, ever realized. Before Elena could respond, Agent Martinez's phone buzzed. He answered it, his expression growing increasingly grim. I see. When? How many? He hung up and looked at Elena with obvious concern. What is it? Marcus escaped from federal custody this morning. Elena felt ice in her veins. How is that possible? Transport vehicle was attacked by unknown assailants. 2 federal marshals are dead. Marcus and 3 other prisoners are missing. Elena sank into her chair. He's coming for me. We don't know that. Agent Martinez, Marcus has spent 17 years planning every aspect of my life. Do you really think he didn't have contingency plans for this scenario? As if summoned by her words, Elena's secure phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she recognized, her old apartment. Elena, don't answer that, Agent Martinez said, but she was already reaching for the phone. Hello, Marcus. Hello, wife. His voice was calm, almost casual, as if he were calling to discuss dinner plans. Elena could hear traffic in the background, which meant he was mobile, probably already close. I'm not your wife anymore. Aren't you? The divorce was never finalized, Elena. Technically, we're still married. Till death do us part, remember? Elena looked at Agent Martinez, who was frantically signaling for backup on his radio. What do you want, Marcus? I want to finish the conversation we started 6 months ago. The one about your place in my life, about understanding your limitations, about accepting what you can and cannot change. I already changed everything, Marcus. I destroyed your network, exposed your crimes, sent your partners to prison. What's left to finish? Marcus laughed, and the sound made Elena's skin crawl. Oh, Elena, you still don't understand, do you? You didn't destroy my network, you eliminated my competition. Victoria and her father were getting greedy, taking too big a piece of the pie. Now that they're gone, I can rebuild with more reliable partners. Elena felt the world tilting again. You planned this. You planned all of it. I planned for multiple contingencies, yes. Including the one where my overly clever wife decided to play detective and expose some corruption. I just made sure that the corruption she exposed belonged to my rivals rather than my allies. Elena thought about all the evidence she'd gathered, all the cases that were being overturned, all the families getting justice. The Patterson case. The Patterson case was handled by Judge Morrison's court, using Victoria's legal strategies. My cases, my methods, my network, those are still intact. In fact, they're about to expand significantly now that I have fewer people to share profits with. Elena realized with growing horror that she'd been manipulated one final time. Even her rebellion, her investigation, her moment of triumph, Marcus had orchestrated all of it. You used me to eliminate your competition while making yourself look like a victim of the system rather than a perpetrator. I used you to clean house, yes. And now it's time for you to come home and take your proper place in my newly organized operation. I'll never. Elena, I'm standing in your old apartment right now. Do you remember the boxes of your parents' things you could never bear to throw away? The photo albums, the jewelry, the letters your mother wrote to you before she died. Elena's breath caught. Marcus, don't. I'm looking at your mother's wedding dress right now. The one you always said you wanted to pass down to your daughter someday. Such beautiful craftsmanship. It would be a shame if something happened to it. Elena closed her eyes. The wedding dress was the last physical connection she had to her mother, the one thing she'd saved from their family home before it was sold to pay debts. That's not all, Marcus continued. I've also got some very interesting evidence about your friend Diane's involvement in our little drama. Turns out she's been embezzling from Henderson and Associates for years. Falsifying records, manipulating client accounts. If this information were to surface during her nephew's judicial confirmation hearings. Elena opened her eyes. Judge Chen's confirmation to the Supreme Court. You destroy his career to get to me. I destroy whatever I need to destroy to get you back where you belong. The question is, are you going to make this easy, or are you going to force me to hurt innocent people? Agent Martinez was gesturing frantically, mouthing, keep him talking, but Elena barely saw him. Marcus was threatening the only people who'd ever shown her genuine kindness, and he was doing it with the casual efficiency of someone ordering coffee. What do you want from me, Marcus? What's the endgame here? I want my wife back. I want you to stop this ridiculous charade of independence and come home where you belong. I want you to be the woman I married, supportive, grateful, willing to let me handle the complicated decisions. You want me to be your accomplice. I want you to be my partner, the way you always were, before you got these ideas about being someone you're not. Elena looked around the safe house, at the generic furniture, the barred windows, the life of hiding and fear that stretched ahead of her. Then she thought about Diane, about Judge Chun, about Professor Reeves, who was somewhere refusing protection to testify against corruption. Everyone who'd ever tried to help her was now in danger because of her choices. If I come back, she said slowly, what happens to them? To Diane, to Judge Chun, to Daniel? If you come back willingly, quietly, and permanently, then everyone gets to keep their lives and careers intact. If you don't, Marcus paused. Well, let's just say I've become very good at making problems disappear. Elena closed her eyes. Marcus was offering her the same choice he'd been offering her entire adult life. Be small, be grateful, be invisible, and everyone else will be safe. The difference was that now she understood the real cost of accepting that deal. Elena, Marcus's voice was getting impatient. I need an answer. Elena looked at Agent Martinez, who was shaking his head frantically. She thought about the families getting justice because of her testimony. She thought about the corruption that was being exposed, the innocent people being freed from prison. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, who would have agreed to anything to protect the people she cared about. And she thought about the woman she'd become, someone who understood that sometimes protecting people meant refusing to give bullies what they wanted. Marcus, she said quietly, I need you to understand something. What? I'm not the same woman you married. I'm not the same woman you abandoned. And I'm definitely not the woman who's going to let you destroy innocent people to get revenge on me. Elena, I'm not coming back. I'm not going to help you rebuild your network. I'm not going to be your partner in crime, or your submissive wife, or your grateful victim. Elena's voice grew stronger with each word. I'm going to keep testifying. I'm going to keep fighting. And I'm going to make sure that every person you've ever hurt gets the justice they deserve. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Elena wondered if Marcus had hung up. Elena, he said finally, and his voice was colder than she'd ever heard it. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. No, Marcus. The biggest mistake of my life was believing that loving you meant I had to disappear. Elena hung up and immediately turned to Agent Martinez. How long do we have? Not long. Elena, you realize what you just did? You declared war on someone with unlimited resources and nothing left to lose. Yes. Elena stood up and walked back to the window. Snow was falling harder now, covering the unfamiliar city in white. But Agent Martinez, you need to understand something. I've been at war my entire adult life. I just didn't know it. What do you mean? I mean, Marcus has been trying to destroy me for 17 years. Making me doubt myself, making me smaller, making me believe I wasn't capable of independent thought or action. The only difference now is that I'm finally fighting back. Elena turned from the window to face Agent Martinez. I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? I want to go back to the city. I want to testify publicly in open court with media coverage. I want to tell my story, all of it, where everyone can hear it. Elena, that's suicide. Marcus will kill you the moment you're visible. Maybe. But he's going to try to kill me anyway, along with everyone I care about. At least this way, my death might serve a purpose. Agent Martinez stared at her. What purpose? To show other women that they don't have to disappear. To prove that even if you've been manipulated and controlled and diminished for years, you can still choose to fight back. To demonstrate that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just elaborate abuse. Elena looked out at the snow again. Marcus wants me to believe that I'm nothing without him, that I'm too weak and stupid and naive to survive on my own. The best way to prove him wrong is to survive, even if it kills me. Agent Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Elena, if we do this, if we bring you back to testify publicly, you understand that we probably can't protect you. I understand. You understand that you're essentially choosing certain death to make a point? Elena thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, afraid to send back an incorrect restaurant order, willing to sign away her right to tell her own story, desperate for any scrap of love even if it came with conditions. Then she thought about the woman she'd become. Someone who'd exposed federal corruption, survived multiple murder attempts, and refused to let powerful people silence her. Agent Martinez, I've been dead for 17 years. I've been a ghost in my own life, a supporting character in someone else's story, a woman so afraid of taking up space that I forgot I was allowed to exist. Elena turned from the window one final time. If I'm going to die, I want to die as myself. The real Elena Rodriguez, not the diminished version Marcus spent years creating. And who is the real Elena Rodriguez? Elena was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question that had haunted her for months. I don't know yet, she said finally. But I'm about to find out. As Agent Martinez made phone calls to arrange her return to the city, Elena sat in the gathering darkness and watched snow cover the world outside. Tomorrow, she would go back to face Marcus and his threats. She would testify publicly about years of manipulation and abuse. She would likely die for the crime of refusing to be silenced. But tonight, for the first time in 17 years, Elena Rodriguez was exactly where she chose to be, doing exactly what she chose to do, and refusing to let anyone else define her worth. It felt like the first real breath she'd taken since she was 16 years old. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering everything in pristine white. A blank slate, a fresh start, a world waiting to be written. Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled to Professor Reeves's number. She stared at it for a long time, then typed a message. Asterisk, I'm coming back to testify publicly. I know you lied to me, and I know I said I could never trust you again. But if you really meant what you said about loving me, about trying to protect me, then I need you to know. I'm not coming back to die. I'm coming back to live. For the first time in my adult life, I'm coming back to live as myself. I hope you understand why I have to do this alone. Asterisk. She stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without sending. Some things, Elena realized, were too important to share. Some transformations had to be completed in solitude. Tomorrow, she would return to the city where her life had been systematically destroyed and rebuilt. She would face the man who'd spent 17 years trying to erase her. She would tell her story to the world, knowing that it might be the last thing she ever did. But tonight, Elena Rodriguez sat in a safe house in an unknown city and felt, for the first time in her adult life, completely free. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. It felt like coming home to herself. Elena returned to her hometown on a gray February morning, the familiar skyline looking strange after months in hiding. Agent Martinez drove her directly to the federal courthouse, where media vans already lined the street despite the early hour. Last chance to change your mind, he said as they sat in the parking garage. We've had 3 credible threats against your life just since yesterday. Elena looked up at the courthouse where she would testify in 4 hours. Any word on Marcus's location? Nothing concrete. But Elena, he's here. We know he's in the city. Elena nodded. She'd expected as much. Marcus had never been one to miss a performance, especially one where he was the star. What about protective detail? We'll have federal marshals in the courtroom, but once you're on that witness stand. Agent Martinez trailed off. Elena, even with security, if someone really wants to get to you, they probably can. I understand. Agent Martinez studied her face. You're not scared. Elena considered the observation. I am scared. I'm terrified. But I'm more afraid of living the rest of my life as someone I'm not than I am of dying as someone I am. As they prepared to enter the courthouse, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, check your email. You need to see this before you testify. D asterisk. Elena's heart clenched. Professor Reeves. She opened her email to find a video file and a brief message. Asterisk, this was recorded yesterday. I'm sorry you have to see it, but you need to know what you're walking into. Asterisk. Elena hesitated, then opened the video. The image showed Diane, tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, but her eyes were fierce. Marcus's voice came from behind the camera. Hello, Elena. I assume you're watching this from some federal safe house, preparing for your grand moment of heroism. Let me show you the cost of that heroism. The camera panned to reveal Professor Reeves, also tied up, blood dried on his face from what looked like a severe beating. Daniel here tried to be a hero too, Marcus continued. He refused to give us information about your location, refused to help us contact you, refused to cooperate in any way. Very noble. Also very stupid. Elena's hands shook as she held the phone. Now, Elena, you have a choice to make. You can proceed with your testimony today, expose more of my alleged crimes, and play the brave whistleblower for the cameras. But if you do, these two people will pay the price for your ego. The camera focused on Diane, who looked directly into the lens with defiance despite her circumstances. Don't you dare come back here for me, Elena Rodriguez, Diane said, her voice hoarse but strong. Don't you dare let this bastard use me to control you. You testify. You tell the truth. You make sure he can never hurt anyone else. Enough, Marcus's voice snapped, and the camera jerked away from Diane. You have until noon to make your choice, Elena. Testify and watch the people who tried to help you die for it. Or come to the address I'm about to send you, alone, and we can end this like civilized people. The video ended with a text message containing an address Elena recognized. The abandoned textile factory where Marcus had taken her on one of their first dates, telling her it reminded him of the beautiful things that could be built in forgotten places. Elena stared at her phone, her entire body numb. Elena, Agent Martinez was watching her with concern. What is it? Elena showed him the video. His face went white. We'll trace the location, send in tactical teams. He'll kill them the moment he sees federal agents. Elena, you cannot seriously be considering going there alone. Elena looked up at the courthouse again. In 3 hours, she was supposed to take the stand and tell her story to the world. In 3 hours, she was supposed to complete her transformation from victim to survivor, from silenced wife to powerful witness. Instead, she was facing the same choice Marcus had been offering her for 17 years. Submit, or watch innocent people suffer for her defiance. Agent Martinez, what are the chances that tactical teams could get to Diane and Daniel before Marcus kills them? Agent Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, very low. If he's prepared for this scenario, if he's got lookouts and escape routes. So my choice is to let 2 innocent people die so I can have my moment of public vindication. Elena, if you go to that warehouse alone, you'll die too. Marcus will kill all 3 of you to tie up loose ends. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, who would have gone to Marcus immediately, who would have traded her own life without hesitation to protect others. Then she thought about the woman she'd become, who understood that sometimes sacrificing yourself only enabled the people hurting you to hurt others. Agent Martinez, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to delay the hearing by 2 hours. Tell them I'm having a security concern. Tell them I need more time to review testimony. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. Elena, and I need you to get me a secure phone with GPS tracking that broadcasts my location to federal agents at all times. Agent Martinez stared at her. You're going to the warehouse. I'm going to the warehouse. But I'm not going there to surrender. Then what are you going there for? Elena looked at him with eyes that had seen too much manipulation, too much cruelty, too much of the cost of being silent in the face of evil. I'm going there to finish this. An hour later, Elena stood outside the abandoned textile factory, holding a phone that was broadcasting her location to a federal surveillance team positioned 2 miles away. She'd removed the FBI wire they'd wanted her to wear. Marcus would check for that immediately. But the phone in her pocket contained a recording app that would capture everything, and her location was being tracked in real time. The factory looked exactly as it had 17 years ago when Marcus had brought her here as a starry-eyed college student. He told her then that he loved finding beauty in forgotten places, bringing life back to things that seemed dead. Now Elena understood that he'd been talking about her. The main door was unlocked. Elena stepped into the cavernous space, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Afternoon light filtered through broken windows, creating patterns of shadow and illumination that made the space feel like a cathedral built for dark worship. Elena! Marcus stepped out from behind a pillar, and Elena was shocked by how different he looked. The polished, successful attorney was gone. This man was thinner, harder, with eyes that held no warmth at all. You came alone. I wasn't sure you would. Where are they? Marcus gestured toward the back of the factory. Elena followed him through a maze of abandoned equipment and debris, her heart hammering with each step. Diane and Professor Reeves were tied to chairs in what had once been the factory's main workspace. Both were conscious, both looked terrible, but both were alive. Elena, don't, Professor Reeves started, but Marcus cut him off with a backhand that made Elena flinch. Now, Marcus said, turning back to Elena, let's talk about your future. I don't have a future, Marcus. We both know you're going to kill me no matter what I say. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Elena, why would I kill you? You're my wife. I love you. The words were so at odds with their surroundings, with Diane and Professor Reeves tied up and bleeding, with the months of threats and manipulation, that Elena almost laughed. You love me? Of course I love you. I've always loved you. Everything I've done has been for us, for our future together. Elena stared at him. Even now, even here, Marcus genuinely believed he was the hero of this story. Marcus, you've spent 17 years manipulating every aspect of my life. You've threatened to have me killed, you've kidnapped innocent people, you've destroyed families for money. What part of that is love? The part where I made you better than you were. Marcus stepped closer, and Elena forced herself not to back away. Elena, when I met you, you were a waitress with no prospects, no future, no understanding of what the world could offer. I gave you a life beyond anything you could have imagined. You gave me a life where I had to ask permission to have opinions. I gave you a life where your opinions mattered because you were connected to someone important. Elena realized with stunning clarity that Marcus truly, genuinely believed everything he was saying. In his mind, he'd rescued her from insignificance. In his mind, her rebellion was ingratitude rather than self-preservation. Marcus, do you remember what you said to me the night you left? About needing someone who could stand beside you at firm events and actually belong there. I remember. Do you know what I've realized? Marcus waited. I do belong there. I belong in rooms with important people discussing important things. I belong in courtrooms exposing corruption. I belong in places where my intelligence and integrity matter. Elena stepped closer to him. I just don't belong there as your accessory. Elena, I belong there as myself. As Elena Rodriguez, the woman who exposed federal corruption. The woman who refused to be silenced. The woman who chose truth over safety, justice over comfort, authenticity over survival. Marcus's expression was shifting from confusion to anger. You belong there because I made you someone worth knowing. No, Marcus. I belong there because I've always been someone worth knowing. You just spent 17 years making sure I forgot that. Elena looked around the factory, at the space where Marcus had once told her he loved finding beauty in forgotten places. You know what the really sad part is? You were right about one thing. There is beauty in forgotten places. There is potential in things that seem broken. But Marcus, you never brought life back to anything. You just found broken things and made sure they stayed broken so you could feel powerful by comparison. Marcus pulled out a gun. Elena had been expecting it, but seeing the weapon still made her stomach clench. Enough, he said. Elena, you're going to call Agent Martinez. You're going to tell him that you've decided not to testify, that you want to disappear, that this whole crusade was a mistake brought on by the stress of our divorce. And if I don't? Marcus turned the gun toward Professor Reeves. If you don't, Daniel dies first. Then Diane. Then you. And I disappear to a country with no extradition treaty, where I can rebuild my operation with clients who appreciate loyalty. Elena looked at Professor Reeves, whose eyes were fixed on hers with an expression of absolute trust. He believed she would find a way out of this. He believed in her capacity to save them all. Elena looked at Diane, who was watching her with the fierce pride of someone who'd spent years helping Elena discover her own strength. Then Elena looked at Marcus, who was pointing a gun at people she cared about and calling it love. Marcus, I need you to understand something. What? You're right that I belong with someone important, someone powerful, someone who can stand in rooms where decisions get made and actually influence those decisions. Marcus lowered the gun slightly, hope flickering in his eyes. But that someone isn't you, Elena continued. That someone is me. Elena pulled out her phone and pressed a button. Immediately, the sound of sirens filled the air outside the factory. You called the FBI, Marcus said, his voice flat. I called the FBI. I called the media. I called everyone who needed to know where to find you. Elena's voice was steady, stronger than she'd ever heard it. Marcus, you made one crucial mistake in all your planning. What mistake? You assumed I came here to save Diane and Daniel. Didn't you? Elena smiled, and for the first time in their entire relationship, she saw fear in Marcus's eyes. I came here to stop you. Permanently. Whatever it takes. Marcus raised the gun again, but this time he pointed it directly at Elena. You're willing to die to stop me? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure you never hurt anyone else. The sirens were getting closer. Marcus looked around the factory like a trapped animal, calculating escape routes, weighing options. Elena, If I'm going down, I'm taking all of you with me. Maybe, Elena said. But Marcus, even if you kill us, even if you escape, it's over. My testimony is already recorded. The evidence is already in federal hands. Your network is already destroyed. You've lost. I haven't lost until you're dead. Yes, you have. Elena stepped closer to the gun. Because even if you kill me, even if you escape justice, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that Elena Rodriguez, the woman you tried to diminish and control and erase, was the one who brought you down. Marcus's hand was shaking now. Elena, stop. Just stop talking and call off the FBI. You'll spend the rest of your life knowing that the woman you thought was too stupid to understand your world was actually smart enough to destroy it. Elena, you'll know that every family that gets justice, every victim who gets compensation, every person who's saved from your corruption, all of it happened because the woman you abandoned found the strength to fight back. The gun wavered in Marcus's hand. Behind them, Elena could hear footsteps, voices, the sound of tactical teams surrounding the building. And Marcus, Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. You'll know that in the end, love wasn't enough. Not your version of love, anyway. Real love doesn't require someone to disappear. Real love doesn't demand silence. Real love doesn't threaten and manipulate and control. Shut up. Real love would have celebrated my strength instead of trying to break it. Real love would have encouraged my dreams instead of replacing them with yours. Real love would have seen my potential and helped me reach it, instead of keeping me small so you could feel big. Marcus's face was contorting with rage and desperation. Elena, I gave you everything. You gave me nothing, Marcus. Everything I have, everything I am, everything I've become, I did that myself. Despite you, not because of you. The factory doors exploded inward as federal agents flooded the space. Marcus spun toward them, the gun moving away from Elena for just a moment. Elena lunged forward. Later, she would barely remember the sequence of events. The gun going off. Marcus falling. Her hand somehow on the weapon, twisting it away from him. The feeling of finally being stronger than the person who'd tried to make her weak. When the chaos settled, Marcus was on the ground in handcuffs, cursing and bleeding from a head wound. Diane and Professor Reeves were being freed by federal agents. Elena was sitting against a concrete pillar, staring at her hands and trying to process what had just happened. Elena, Agent Martinez knelt beside her. Are you hurt? Elena looked up at him. Is it over? It's over. Marcus is in custody. You're safe. Elena nodded, but she wasn't thinking about safety. She was thinking about the moment when she'd lunged for the gun, when she'd chosen action over paralysis, when she'd finally stopped being afraid of taking up space. Agent Martinez? Yes. I want to make a statement. To the media, to the courts, to anyone who will listen. Elena, you've been through trauma. I want to tell my story. All of it. Not just the legal parts, not just the corruption and the crimes. I want to tell the story of what it's like to spend 17 years disappearing piece by piece, and what it takes to put yourself back together. Agent Martinez studied her face. Why? Elena looked across the factory at Professor Reeves, who was refusing medical attention until he could check on her. She looked at Diane, who was arguing with paramedics and demanding to know if Elena was okay. She looked at the space where Marcus had once told her he loved finding beauty in forgotten places. Because there are other women out there who think they're broken, Elena said. Women who think they're too small, too plain, too simple for the lives they want. Women who are making themselves smaller every day to fit into relationships that diminish them. Elena stood up, her legs steady despite everything that had happened. I want them to know that they're not broken. They're not too anything. And they don't have to choose between love and authenticity. They can choose themselves, even if it's terrifying. They can choose to take up space, even if people tell them they don't deserve it. Elena, Professor Reeves called from across the factory. Elena looked at him. This man who'd lied to her, betrayed her, and then risked his life to protect her. This man whose feelings for her were real even if their foundation had been built on deception. Daniel, are you okay? Elena considered the question. Was she okay? Her entire life had been revealed as an elaborate manipulation. Her marriage had been a lie. Her transformation had cost her everything she'd thought she wanted. But she was alive. She was free. She was finally completely herself. I'm better than okay, she said. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. As Elena walked out of the factory where her nightmare had began and ended, she realized something that made her smile for the first time in months. She had no idea what came next. No plan, no safety net, no predetermined path. For the first time in her adult life, Elena Rodriguez was facing a completely unknown future. It felt like the greatest gift she'd ever given herself. The impossible choice had turned out not to be impossible at all. She hadn't had to choose between saving others and saving herself. She'd chosen to save everyone by refusing to let fear make the decision for her. Tomorrow she would testify. She would tell her story. She would help send Marcus to prison for the rest of his life. But today, she had done something even more important. Today, Elena Rodriguez had finally chosen herself. 3 days later, Elena stood outside the federal courthouse steps, facing a sea of media cameras and reporters that stretched for blocks. Behind her, the building's marble columns caught the morning light like pillars of justice finally being fulfilled. Agent Martinez stood to her left, but Elena had insisted on speaking without prepared remarks, without legal counsel, without anyone filtering her words. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd, "my name is Elena Rodriguez. 3 days ago, I helped bring down a corruption network that has destroyed families and perverted justice for over a decade. But that's not why I'm here today." The crowd quieted, cameras zooming in on her face. "I'm here to tell you about a different kind of corruption. The kind that happens in living rooms and bedrooms and dinner conversations. The kind that makes women believe they have to choose between love and authenticity. The kind that convinces us our dreams are too big, our voices too loud, our needs too much." Elena paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. Many were women, and she could see recognition in their eyes. "For 17 years, I was married to Marcus Rivera. The world saw a successful man and his supportive wife. What they didn't see was a woman who was systematically taught to doubt her own intelligence, diminish her own dreams, and silence her own voice in the name of love." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the testimony they'd expected. Marcus didn't just commit financial crimes. He committed crimes against my spirit, my identity, my understanding of my own worth. And the most insidious part is that he convinced me I was lucky to be chosen by him, grateful to be included in his world, honored to be allowed to exist in the shadow of his success. Elena's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "But here's what I want every woman listening to understand. You are not too much. Your dreams are not too big. Your voice is not too loud. Your needs are not inconvenient. And love, real love, will never ask you to make yourself smaller." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Real love celebrates your strength. Real love encourages your growth. Real love sees your potential and helps you reach it, instead of feeling threatened by it. Elena looked directly into the cameras. "I spent years believing I wasn't smart enough, sophisticated enough, good enough for the life I wanted. But the truth is, I was always enough. I was always capable. I was always worthy of respect and partnership and authentic love. I just had to stop accepting less than I deserved." A reporter called out, "Mrs. Rodriguez, what's your message to other women in similar situations?" Elena smiled, a real, radiant smile that transformed her entire face. "My message is this: you already have everything you need to change your life. You have intelligence, you have strength, you have value that exists independent of anyone else's recognition. The question isn't whether you're capable of more. You are. The question is whether you're ready to stop settling for less." Another reporter, "What's next for you?" Elena looked up at the courthouse behind her, then back at the crowd. "What's next is that I'm going back to school. I'm getting my business degree, the one I postponed for 17 years. I'm starting a nonprofit organization to help women escape financial abuse and rebuild their lives. And I'm going to use everything Marcus taught me about manipulation to help other women recognize it and resist it." "Are you concerned about your safety?" "I'm concerned about my purpose," Elena replied. "Marcus Rivera spent 17 years trying to make me afraid of my own potential. I'm not going to waste another day living in fear." The questions continued for another 20 minutes, but Elena could see that something was happening in the crowd. Women were crying, nodding, taking out their phones to call someone. Men were looking thoughtful, some uncomfortable. The conversation she'd started was already spreading. As the press conference ended, Elena was approached by a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and the careful posture of someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. "Mrs. Rodriguez? My name is Sarah Patterson. My husband. He's been telling me for years that I'm lucky he puts up with me, that no one else would want someone like me. listening to you today." She stopped, tears streaming down her face. "I think I've been accepting less than I deserve." Elena took Sarah's hands in hers. "You have been. But Sarah, recognizing that is the first step to changing it. You're already braver than you know." "I don't know how to start." Elena pulled out a business card, one she'd had printed that morning. "Call this number. It's a hotline for women planning to leave abusive relationships. They'll help you make a safety plan, find resources, connect you with legal aid. You don't have to do this alone." Sarah stared at the card like it was a lifeline. "What if I'm wrong? What if he really does love me and I'm just being ungrateful?" "Sarah, love doesn't make you feel grateful for basic respect. Love doesn't make you question your own worth. Love doesn't require you to become smaller, so someone else can feel bigger." Elena squeezed her hands. "Trust your instincts. They're trying to save you." Over the next hour, Elena was approached by dozens of women. Each had a similar story. Partners who diminished them, dreams they'd abandoned, voices they'd learned to silence. Each left with resources, with contact information, with the beginning of a plan to reclaim their lives. As the crowd dispersed, Elena found herself alone on the courthouse steps with Agent Martinez. "That was incredible," he said. "Elena, you just started a movement." "I just told the truth," Elena replied. "The truth has a way of resonating when people are ready to hear it." "What you said about the nonprofit, were you serious?" Elena looked out at the city where she'd spent her entire adult life feeling like an outsider. Now it looked different, full of possibility instead of intimidation. "Dead serious. Agent Martinez, Marcus's network stole millions from families over the years. The restitution funds are going to be substantial. I want to use my portion to create something that helps women escape the kind of situation I was in." That's brilliant, actually. Using the money from his crimes to help his victims. Not just his victims. All victims. Every woman who's been told she's too much or not enough. Every woman who's been convinced that love requires self-erasure. Elena paused. "I want to call it the Elena Rodriguez Foundation for Authentic Living." Agent Martinez smiled. "I like it. But Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you sure you're ready for this? Running a nonprofit, being a public figure, having your story scrutinized? It's going to be intense." Elena considered the question. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified by the prospect of that much visibility, that much responsibility. Now the idea energized her. "Agent Martinez, for 17 years I was afraid of taking up space. I was afraid of having opinions, making waves, being inconvenient. I spent so much energy trying to be the right kind of woman that I forgot there's no wrong way to be yourself." She turned to look at the courthouse one more time. "I'm not afraid of intensity anymore. I'm afraid of insignificance. I'm afraid of wasting the strength I discovered. I'm afraid of not using my voice now that I've found it." As they prepared to leave, Elena's phone rang. The caller ID made her heart skip. Professor Reeves. "Elena, I watched your press conference. It was extraordinary." Elena felt a familiar warmth at the sound of his voice, complicated by the memory of his betrayal. "Daniel, how are you healing?" "Physically, I'm fine. Emotionally." He paused. "Elena, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond." "Okay. When Marcus first approached me to monitor you, I said yes because I needed the money and I thought it would be simple surveillance. But Elena, after the first week of our business law class, I realized you were extraordinary. Your insights, your questions, the way you approached complex problems, you were the best student I'd taught in years." Elena listened, her chest tight. "I kept taking Marcus's money, but I stopped reporting anything useful. I told him you were struggling, that you weren't adapting well to academic life, that you posed no threat to his plans. I was trying to protect you by making him underestimate you." "Daniel, let me finish." "Elena, I fell in love with your mind first. Your curiosity, your determination, your capacity for growth. I fell in love with watching you discover your own intelligence. The way you lit up when you grasped a difficult concept, the way you challenged assumptions, the way you refused to accept easy answers." Elena felt tears building behind her eyes. "I know I betrayed your trust. I know I started our relationship under false pretenses. But Elena, everything I felt for you was real. My admiration for your intellect, my respect for your strength, my belief in your potential, all of that was genuine." "Daniel," Elena said softly, "why are you telling me this now?" "Because I watched you today and realized something. You don't need me to believe in you anymore. You believe in yourself. You don't need my validation or my protection or my love to complete you. You're complete on your own. Elena closed her eyes, processing his words. But Elena, if you ever decide you want a partner, not someone to complete you, but someone to stand beside you as an equal, I'd like to be considered for the position. Elena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about trust and forgiveness and the difference between need and choice. Daniel, if we ever try again, and I'm not saying we will, it would have to be completely different. No secrets, no agendas, no one trying to protect the other from difficult truths. I understand. It would have to be a partnership between equals. Two people who chose each other, not two people who needed each other. I wouldn't want it any other way. Elena looked out at the city sprawling before her, full of women who might be ready to choose themselves. I need time, Daniel. I need to build this new life, this foundation, this version of myself who exists independently of any relationship. I need to be whole on my own before I can consider being part of something with someone else. I understand, he said again. And Elena, however long it takes, I'll be here. Not waiting for you, living my own life, doing my own work. But here, if you ever decide you want me to be. After Elena hung up, she sat on the courthouse steps in the afternoon sun, thinking about choices and possibilities and the strange freedom of not knowing what came next. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Saw the press conference on TV. I'm proud of you, honey. Also, Henderson and Associates wants to offer you a position as our forensic accounting specialist. Interested? Elena smiled and typed back. Interested in consulting work while I get the foundation started. But Diane? I'm going to need a raise. I know my worth now. Diane's response was immediate. About damn time. As Elena prepared to leave the courthouse, a young woman approached her hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 22, with the kind of bright intelligence in her eyes that reminded Elena of herself at that age. Mrs. Rodriguez? I'm a journalism student at the university. I was wondering if you'd consider speaking to our women's studies class about recognizing manipulation in relationships. Elena looked at this young woman, probably the same age Elena had been when she'd met Marcus, and felt a fierce protective instinct. What's your name? Maria Santos. Maria, I'd be honored to speak to your class. But I want to do more than that. I want to develop a curriculum about financial independence, emotional manipulation, and building authentic relationships. Would you be interested in helping me create it? Maria's eyes lit up. Really? You'd let me help? Maria, you're going to be part of the generation that changes how we think about love and partnership and women's potential. I need your perspective, your energy, your questions. Elena handed her a business card. Call me next week. Let's change the world together. As Elena finally walked away from the courthouse, she realized that the morning's press conference had been more than just testimony. It had been a declaration of who she was becoming. Not just a survivor, but a catalyst. Not just a woman who'd escaped manipulation, but a woman who would help others recognize and resist it. Elena Rodriguez had spent 17 years making herself smaller to fit into Marcus's world. Now she was going to spend the rest of her life helping women understand that the world needed to expand to fit them. Behind her, the courthouse stood as a symbol of justice finally served. Ahead of her, the city stretched out like a canvas waiting to be painted with new possibilities. For the first time in her adult life, Elena Rodriguez was exactly where she belonged, at the center of her own story, writing her own ending, creating her own future. The transformation was complete. The real work was just beginning. And Elena had never been more ready for anything in her life. 6 months later, the wedding of Vito Blaine and Elena Rodriguez took place on a private beach in Martha's Vineyard, with only family and close friends present. Sophia served as her mother's maid of honor, wearing a dress the same shade of blue as the ocean stretching toward the horizon. As she watched her parents exchange vows they'd written to each other, vows that spoke of love surviving impossible odds, of families reunited against all expectations, of hope triumphing over the cruelest manipulations, Sophia felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. I, Elena, take you Vito, not just as my husband, but as proof that some love stories are too powerful to be destroyed by those who would tear them apart, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly over the sound of waves. I, Vito, take you, Elena, and promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the family you gave me, the daughter you protected, and the love you preserved through 23 years of separation. When they kissed, officially becoming husband and wife for the second time, Sophia applauded with tears streaming down her face. The family that had been stolen from her twice was finally, permanently hers. The reception was held in the garden of the beach house, under string lights that twinkled like stars. Sophia found herself standing at the edge of the party, watching her parents dance to the same song they danced to at company parties 24 years ago, when their love affair had been a secret that would change all their lives. "You look happy," a voice said beside her. Sophia turned to find Daniel Martinez, the attorney who'd helped expose the conspiracy, and had since become both the Foundation's legal counsel and Sophia's closest friend. "I am happy," she said. "For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I belong." "And where is that?" Sophia gestured toward her parents, toward the handful of friends who'd gathered to celebrate love surviving impossible odds, toward the Foundation staff who'd become like extended family. "Here, with people who see me as I am, not as who they want me to be or who they can manipulate me into becoming." Daniel smiled. Sophia Blaine, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, daughter of one of the most powerful couples in America, and the woman who proved that sometimes the best revenge is just living authentically. "Speaking of living authentically," Sophia said, turning to face him fully, "I have something to ask you." "What's that?" "Would you like to dance with me? Not as my attorney, not as the Foundation's legal counsel, but as the man I've fallen in love with over the past 6 months." Daniel's face lit up with surprise and joy. "Sophia, are you sure? After everything you've been through, the last thing you need is another complicated relationship." "Daniel, what I've learned is that love doesn't have to be complicated. Love can be simple, honest, supportive. Love can be choosing someone who celebrates your strength instead of trying to diminish it." Sophia took his hand and led him onto the makeshift dance floor. "I'm choosing you, Daniel Martinez. Not because I need you, but because I want you. Not because you complete me, but because you complement the person I've already become." As they swayed together under the stars, Sophia caught sight of her parents watching them with obvious approval. Elena raised her champagne glass in a small toast, and Vito nodded with the satisfied expression of a father who'd seen his daughter choose well. "There's something else," Sophia said as the song ended. "The Foundation is expanding internationally. We're opening offices in 12 countries to help families that have been destroyed by corporate manipulation and corruption." "That's incredible, Sophia. You're going to change the world." "We're going to change the world," she corrected. "Daniel, I want you to come with me. Not just as legal counsel, but as my partner in everything. I want to build something meaningful with someone who understands that real partnership means both people getting stronger, not one person becoming smaller." Daniel pulled her closer, his eyes full of love and admiration. "Sophia Blaine, you are extraordinary. Yes to all of it. Yes to the Foundation, yes to the partnership, and yes to spending my life watching you change the world." As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Sophia found herself alone on the beach with her parents, watching the moon reflect off the ocean. "Any regrets?" Vito asked, settling into the sand beside her. Sophia considered the question. 6 months ago, she'd been a maid who'd never known her parents, who'd accepted scraps of affection, who'd been afraid to take up space. Tonight, she was the CEO of a billion-dollar company, the founder of an international foundation, and the daughter of parents who loved her unconditionally. "None," she said finally. "Even the pain, even the betrayal, even the week in federal prison, all of it led me here, to this family, to this life, to the person I was always meant to become." Elena took her daughter's hand. "Sophia, what do you think you want to do next?" Sophia looked out at the ocean, at the vast expanse of possibilities stretching toward the horizon. "I want to find other families like ours. Other people whose lives have been destroyed by powerful people who think human beings are chess pieces. I want to give them the resources and support they need to fight back." "And personally?" Vito asked with a knowing smile. "Any thoughts about expanding our family further?" Sophia blushed. "Daniel and I are taking things slowly. But Papa, someday I'd like to give you grandchildren who grow up knowing they're loved, knowing they belong, knowing they never have to make themselves smaller to deserve affection." "They'll know," Elena said firmly, "because they'll grow up watching their mother be exactly who she was meant to be, without apology or compromise." As they sat together on the beach, Sophia realized that the story that had begun with violence and humiliation had become something entirely different, a testament to the power of truth, the resilience of love, and the triumph of authenticity over manipulation. The slap that had changed everything had ultimately saved them all. 18 months later, Sophia stood before the United Nations General Assembly, delivering a keynote address about corporate accountability and family preservation. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation, now operated in 27 countries, had helped reunite over 3,000 families destroyed by corporate manipulation, and had become the leading advocate for victims of economic abuse worldwide. In the audience, she could see Daniel, now her fiancé, taking notes for the legal brief he was preparing for their next major case. Beside him sat her parents, whose love story had become a symbol of hope for couples separated by forces beyond their control. The question, Sophia said to the assembled delegates, is not whether powerful people will try to manipulate and control those with less power. They will. The question is whether we'll have the courage to stand up, speak truth, and refuse to let anyone else define our worth. She paused, looking out at an audience of world leaders hanging on her every word. I stand before you today, not as someone who was lucky enough to escape manipulation, but as someone who learned that the most radical thing any of us can do is refuse to make ourselves smaller for other people's comfort. We can choose authenticity over approval. We can choose truth over convenience. We can choose love that celebrates us rather than love that diminishes us. The standing ovation went on for 5 minutes, but Sophia barely heard it. She was thinking about the young woman who'd broken a bottle of wine and been slapped for it, who'd believed she was worthless, who'd accepted cruelties of affection because she'd never believed she deserved more. That woman was gone forever, replaced by someone who understood that she'd never been broken at all, just temporarily convinced to believe she was. As Sophia left the podium to thunderous applause, she passed a young woman in the hallway. A UN intern who looked nervous, uncertain, like she was trying to make herself as small as possible. Excuse me, Sophia said gently. What's your name? Maria Santos, ma'am. I'm just an intern. I don't want to bother you. Maria, can I tell you something? The young woman nodded. You're not just anything. You're here because you earned it, because you're intelligent and capable and valuable. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. Sophia handed her a business card. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation is always looking for bright young women who want to help other families find their strength. Think about it. As Sophia walked away, she heard Maria Santos call after her. Miss Blaine? Thank you. For everything you do and for seeing me. Sophia smiled, thinking about the ripple effects of transformation, about how one person choosing authenticity could give permission for countless others to do the same. The little girl who'd been abandoned, the young woman who'd been slapped, the daughter who'd been stolen. All of them had led to this moment, to this life, to this understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. Sophia Blaine walked out of the United Nations building into the bright New York sunshine, ready to change the world one authentic moment at a time. Behind her, Maria Santos stared at the business card and made a decision that would transform her life. She was going to stop making herself smaller. The revolution of authenticity was spreading, one courage moment at a time. And it had all started with a broken bottle of wine and a daughter who refused to stay lost. What did this story teach you about the power of truth over manipulation, and the importance of refusing to make yourself smaller for anyone else's comfort? Have you ever had to choose between being accepted and being authentic? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences. And if this story of family, resilience, and the triumph of love over conspiracy moved you, make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories that will remind you of your own unlimited potential. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.